So hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, welcome back to another lovely video starring yours truly and the Micra. So we're just going to do a short and sweet debrief following on from rounds 3 and 4 of Time Attack this weekend just gone. The car developed quite a few issues, some more serious than others that we need to rectify for Alton Park in 3.5 weeks. So first issue we got is brakes. So I've checked the data. Let's just use Brands Hatch as the example. So top speed down the pit straight before breaking into Paddock Hill was 92 miles an hour on average. Now this year we have far superseded that, and the data shows our maximum speed breaking into Paddock Hill was 108 miles an hour. So 16 miles an hour difference. That's a hell of a difference. Now our brake setup just can't cope with it anymore. Fine for last year's power, but this year no chance. We are using a 100 NX 240mm vented setup, which is a straight bot onto the K11 Micra, but it just can't cope with the speed that I'm doing now. So I need to look into some alternatives for the brakes. I've seen some Pulsar GTIR Willwood setups out there which are near enough a bolt-on kit to a Micra, so they're looking pretty tempting, but also a bit pricey. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do about brakes, but they definitely need sorting. And then for the rear, obviously we're still on the drums, which allows you to bolt a VAG group caliper onto the rear because they're cheap and cheerful, and I think they use a 240mm disc. So I did shelve that for a while, so I might need to bring that back into the development circle sooner rather than later. So next we've got a couple of issues which sort of all revolve into one issue, and that is that we've still got this weird suspension bouncing that we had last year. Now I thought it might have been the diff, maybe the diff might have been dud, we don't know. But obviously we've got a completely different gearbox, we've got a completely brand new diff in there, and we're still getting this weird suspension oscillation on left hand corners. Right hand corners doesn't do it, it's always left hand corners. Now I'm thinking because of my fat ass in the driver's seat, and that's just what's causing this weird suspension issue. Now what I think is happening is as we're turning left, this wheel's lifting off the floor, and as the suspension fights it to bring it back level, and as it contacts the surface it sort of skips and it keeps bouncing itself back up in the air. But imagine that in sort of like a rapid sort of like weird vibration sensation, and there you go. So to combat that, I think the issue might be due to ride height. Now I know a lot of people have said how stupid it looks because it rides so high, and there's a reason why. So I'm just going to put the car up in the air quickly and show you why. So let me just come over to the board, let's just do some drawing. So let's just say this line here is the factory steel of the arch, and then obviously you've got the inside piece here, that's your inner wheel well, and then you've got your and then you've got obviously on the standard ride height you'd have your sort of tyre sort of set about there, and obviously when your suspension travel is in this pocket here. Now we've put a Nismo kit on ours, and then the way the Nismo kit's on is it goes from the slip here and it does this. So you end up with this sort of like fiberglass monstrosity on the side of it, and the issue is obviously we've got some nice wide wheels on there now, so you end up with this. So when these wheel wants to go up and down, it wants to impact this area here. So what I need to do is cut out this steel, and then we'll weld up this steel up here, and then we'll trim out all this fiberglass. So the way our inner arch will work is that we'll have all this lovely room here for the suspension to go up and down, which means we should be able to lower it by a good 3 or 4 inches. So so I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to see this, but let me just get a torch and let's just shine it in the arch, and you can probably see what the issue is there. So we need to trim out all, so basically where the blue stops and the black starts, we've got to trim out all the black. So yeah, a bit of welding involved with that. I dare say it's probably a full day's work to do that in a neat fashion, but I think we're going to have to do that sooner rather than later for Alton Park to try and sort that suspension issue. So next, steering. Steering is a bit of a chore in a minute now. I caved into peer pressure and we decided not to run power steering. Now we ditched the power steering based on the promise that we were going to be receiving a manual rack. And unfortunately the manual rack never turned up on time for Brands Hatch. We didn't have time to sort anything or put the power steering back on, so what we ended up doing was making a reservoir bottle to house some power steering fluid, and then we had both sides of the power steering rack go to this tank. So we ran the power steering rack without any power to it, So the steering was really heavy. I managed with it. There's nothing we could do about it. But I think obviously now running the 225s on the front, it's just a bit too much meat to deal with by hand. So it will do for Alton Park if you don't get it done. But we need to put the power steering back in it now. I did buy an Astra G Bosch electronic power steering pump, hydraulic. So I'm going to look at getting that fitted over the next couple of weeks, start running the lines and that for it, and then obviously get how to come down and power it up. So we've got a few issues to do with the gearbox. The gears were a bit difficult to find. You'd go for third, you'd find first. You'd go for fourth, you'd find second. And that was even before we put up the trailer to go to Brands Hatch. Not quite sure what's going on there. I sort of did a bit of adjustment to the linkage, and we sort of got the gears where we needed them to be, albeit it seemed incredibly difficult and notchy, almost as if like you was forcing something somewhere in order to get it into gear. Now, we lost first, second gear for some odd reason on the Saturday at Brands Hatch, but then they weirdly came back. We checked the linkage when that happened, and we couldn't find anything wrong. We took the linkage off the car completely, and I got a screwdriver in the selector fork, and I could find third, fourth, fifth reverse, and I could know for love nor money I couldn't get the selector over to first and second. Now, interestingly, on the Sunday, on the first session, the drive shaft popped out. We discovered this when we pulled it to the pit garage. There was fluid on the floor. We jacked it up, and it's coming from the driver's side drive shaft, which was out the box and wasn't meshing properly with the diff. Now, we literally pushed it in with no effort with my finger. Again, no exaggeration, no force, no pressure. This is just pushed in with my finger. So something's telling me maybe the circlips on the inner CVs have made a run for it and are currently running right inside the gearbox, which would make sense. Maybe they've worked themselves into the selector mechanism and locked us out first and second, and obviously at some point they've dislodged, and it's allowed us to get first and second gear back. Now, don't really want to shut the gearbox at this point, so I'm waiting for a stock gear linkage to come in this week. Unfortunately, I cut mine up to begin with to fit that short shifter, then realised we didn't need to, so then I've got a cut up shifter that I didn't need to cut up. Frustrating, I know, but it is what it is. So I'm going to fit that first and see what that does to the difference in selecting gears. And on the issue of selecting gears and a gearbox is it got to a point where the bite point on the clutch was on the floor, almost as if it wanted to be through the firewall. Now, I have put a really heavy duty clutch in this that I didn't really need to do. I put a stage 4 clutch in there, which I think is rated to 500 foot-pounds. So yeah, 500 foot-pounds on a cable clutch, and I think we had just stretched the cable. So I then put a brand spanking new cable on, because I thought this may be an issue, so I bought 2 brand new ones with us. We put a new cable on, went out for the next session, and by the time we'd come back in for that session, same again. Now, I managed to take a lock nut off there, which gave us an extra 5 minutes of travel on the cable, and that seems to be worked perfectly, but I think this is going to be a reoccurring problem. So my solution is buy a clutch which isn't as heavy, maybe like a stage 3 or stage 2, or convert the clutch to hydraulic. Now, the gearbox we're using from the 1.8 Primera is a hydraulic gearbox as standard, but we converted it to cable using all the CG gearbox stuff from the original Micra engine that we had. Just because we want to save a bit of money and reuse the clutch pedal and the clutch cable, but I think that's something we're going to have to deal with again. I think for Alton Park, for the price of the cables, I think I'm not going to make that a priority job. So I think for Alton Park, we're just going to take another extra couple of cables with us and maybe modify them before we take them, so we've got a bit of extra adjustment on there, and take it from there really. Another issue is with the steering column. A simple fix. It sort of cams on itself as you're cording quite hard, almost as if like the shaft is spinning in the brackets. Now, I'm pretty sure that's going to be a simple fix with a welder and a bit of steel, so that's going to be an easy fix. Let's not worry about that one. Now, Supercharger. Now, we tried to activate it on Sunday's YOLO mode. We was going to put it in for the moon tune. Unfortunately, an issue that I had with our development Supercharger kit we used last year, and I thought the Supercharger might react differently. Now we've got the turbo in there. So what happens at the minute is that when the throttle body closes, the boost from Supercharger, some goes back through the compressor housing and sort of does like this weird compressor surge thing on the turbo. and then the rest of it sort of goes back and stalls the rotors and the supercharger, and it just loads up the engine quite badly for like a split second. So I'm pretty sure we're going to have to put a blow-off valve on the positive side of the supercharger. Unfortunately, the Elite 1500 cannot run another throttle body. Obviously, we've got two on here. We've got one we're actually using for the inlet manifold, and we're using the second throttle body for the bypass valve. So it's going to have to be a vacuum operated valve, probably in the form of like a Turbo Smart or something. I'm not quite sure at this moment, and that's hopefully going to allow us to then run the supercharger. And then while on the subject of the supercharger, is we need to do another bracket basically. I did sort of put a bracket on here for this weekend just gone, but I also designed another bracket, because when I finished making that bracket, I came to the conclusion that I was going to need an extra idler in there, so we had a bit more belt wrap around on a supercharger. I'm going to do a separate video on that, because obviously we've never sort of concluded on the original supercharger bracket video, and this is why really, because I think we're now on the 5th revision of the bracket. So yeah, I look forward to a video on that in the future. So next is the fuel tank. Now, we had a serious issue with fuel starvation last year. I'm not really sure why, but basically as soon as the tank dips below half or 5/8, it's not quite half, it's not quite 3/4, it's sort of in the mean, so about 5/8 of a tank. As soon as it dips below that, we just started getting massive fuel surge on right hand corners. That's been an Achilles heel last year, so we've always had to run the car with a full tank of fuel, but because of what's at stake here with a lot more boost in it now, obviously if you run lean for a split second, that's it, the engine will melt in an instant. So we're going to have to build a fuel cell for it. Now I think we're going to go with a 30 litre tank, because I think by the time we count for all the baffles and bits and bobs inside, we're probably going to end up about 25 litres. So yeah, we're going to I've already bought all the materials and bits and bobs for that this morning, but then we're going to run like a little swirl pot setup, so hopefully that's going to make the car a lot better, because at the minute we've got to carry around 20 litres of fuel that we don't need. So by sorting that out, that's an instant 20 kilos of weight out of the car, so should make us go faster as well. And then last is Aero. So it's not just about power making the car go faster, it's also about making the car a bit more streamlined so the air doesn't slow it down. So we're going to do a bit of more on the Aero package, as it were. We're going to trim the diaper out of the rear bumper to stop it acting as a parachute. I need to make some tweaks to the wing. Obviously the Aero is going to help obviously when we lower it. And then my DIY splitter, which is over here, unfortunately got quite heavily damaged at Donington last year. Had a lovely excursion for the gravel traps at T1. So yeah, I'm hoping to develop the Aero a bit better this year. So hopefully for Alton Park we're going to have the splitter back on, and I'll finally get done with the canards on the side and try and get some brake ducts in there as well to help with the braking. So that's it. Quick, short, well, hopefully short video of me waffling on for 10-15 minutes. So yeah, just want to debrief really with all the issues that we've got or had with the car at rounds 3 and 4 at Time Attack. As of now, we've got well, 3.5 weeks basically to get the car back into well, fix as much as that as we can really. Brakes are more important. Some things are more important than others, so we'll prioritise what needs to be done in that time. So yeah, thanks for watching another video. Like, subscribe and all that bullshit, and we'll see you in the next video. Life's a shit house.